here, scoot out on the edge of your seat, right out on the very edge of your seat. Everybody, just sit out on the edge of your seat just a little bit. And that's it. Scoot out right on the edge. Now, what I need for you to do while you're sitting there is to lean back in the seat. Just, that looks better already. Now, if you would, while you're back like that, lean a little bit to the right, about 20 degrees to the right. And now about 20 degrees to the left. The chairs needed dusting, and I told that Victor that we would get that done, and I'd try to help out wherever I could. You know, when I came to Singapore, I was very encouraged that the similarities that are going on where I live in the United States, and parking is a problem here, I could tell. I recently had gone to Denver, Colorado to catch a plane and head out to another part of the U.S. for a week-long trip, and I hit the airport and was trying to find a place to park. And they have a 4-story parking place at the airport, and all the parking places were filled. So finally, I just encouraged Carol to let me out at the door, and I just fend for myself and get on in the airport and catch the plane. She could go back home. So while we were standing there looking for that, and I was getting my luggage out of the car, there was this obviously elderly, rich lady in a brand new Mercedes, 4-door, beautiful car. And she had obviously been in the same boat that I was in, looking for a place to park. So all of a sudden she saw the tail lights come on the car, so she pulled up alongside, and this car backed out, and she was going to pull in the parking space. And just as she went to do that, a bright red Corvette just pulled right in there. And this young guy got out of the car, and he was adjusting his tie, and the lady rolled the window down and says, "I can't believe you did that." He said, "Oh, honey, when you're young and fast, you can do things like that," and turned around and walked off. So she angled on up a little bit and put that thing in drive at about a 45-degree angle. Saw her adjusting her mirror right in the reverse, and she put her head back against the headrest, put that thing in reverse, and she floorboarded that thing, and rubber squalled, went all over. She rammed into this plastic Corvette, and plastic just went everywhere. And this guy turned around and went running back over there and said, "Lady, I can't believe you did that." She said, "Honey, when you're old and rich, you can do things like that." Well, it's the same problems the world over with parking. So whether you're young and fast or old and rich, I trust things are somewhat the same. There was a story of a young boy in one of the states in Tennessee, in the middle of our United States, that had always wanted to go and see a circus. And he was 13 years old and had never done that. He went to town one Saturday, a small rural town, small city, and he went to town and saw a poster in one of the shops that said that a circus was going to be coming to that small town several months later. So he went back home and asked his dad if there was a possibility that he could go and see that circus. And his dad said, sure, that would be fine, but he would have to earn the extra money in order to be able to do that. So after school each day, and he had finished his chores and his work around the house and the things that he had to get done as a part of the family, that he would go and work for other people to make extra money. He saved up enough money, and at the end of that time, a couple of months, why, he had enough money, and time came for the circus to come to town, and it was on a Saturday, and a lot of small towns from around had come to the city, or come to this small town to see the circus. So this young man got up early in the morning at the crack of dawn, and he walked all the way into town, several miles, and got there early and looked up and down the street where the parade of this circus was going to come by to figure out where was the best place to see that circus. And he figured out the best place, and as the stores opened, he went in and put his money down on the counter, and he got a ticket to go to the main event out at the fairgrounds that the circus was going to be held. And then he got out and positioned himself for the parade that was going to come by. Well, before long, everybody from the surrounding towns came and just filled the street and lined the street with people. And he began to hear the music and the parade way off in the background that rounded the corner and was coming down the main street. And he thought, this is great. This is everything that he had dreamt that a circus might be. And as the circus went by, he was excited, enjoyed it, and the parade was just fabulous. And this clown came by on a unicycle, these one-wheeled cycles you balance yourself on, and the young man stuck his ticket out to the main event, and the clown grabbed that ticket and went on his way. Well, before long, the parade went by and went on out of town, and the young man just sat there savoring the time and that he had looked forward to and enjoying that, and then turned, and as the crowd dispersed and went home, he walked home also. When he got home, his dad said, "Son, how was the circus?" And he said, "Oh, Dad, it was great. The parade was more than I ever dreamt." And he said, "Well, son, what else?" He said, "What do you mean, what else?" He said, "Dad, the parade was just great." He said, "Well, son, the ticket was not for the parade, it was for the main event." Now, as Christians, it's so easy to get caught up in the parade of the Christian life and realize and miss the whole point of the ticket is designed for the main event in the Christian life. And the main event in the Christian life is knowing Christ and making Him known. It's very easy to get caught up in the activities, in the parades, in the excitement, in the rah-rahs, and be going so fast that we miss and forget what the main event is all about. That for which we've been set apart and that for which we're here. For the next 3 sessions that I'll join you, I would like to focus in on 3 different aspects of the main event. Focusing in on a clear vision for your city. The Lord Jesus came and He died for the world. He has called and He has set you and me apart at this time in redemptive history. And I am so convinced in my own heart these days, as we look at the major shifts and trends going on in America, around the world, in Singapore, wherever. In America alone, 75% of all the people that live in America today live in the urban areas of America. Urbanization is a worldwide phenomenon that's taking place. And if you're going to love the world and have the world on your heart, which the Lord does, you're going to have a heart for the people in the cities, because that's where the people live. The Great Commission in our generation and the next are going to be won and lost in the cities of the world. Singapore is an unusual opportunity to respond and model the impact that can take place when the people of God take the gospel of God and impact a city. What I want to talk about the next 3 sessions that we're together is responding to what God has done in your heart in setting you apart, yoking ourselves together as a band of men and women, willing to submit ourselves to the Lordship of Jesus Christ and be involved together at a time and capture the destiny that God has for you in your life. As we look at the next 3 sessions together, I'd like to look at maybe 3 different aspects of this main event. The first one has to do with the heart of a laborer. The second, the vision of a laborer. And then lastly, the impact of a laborer. And tonight, in a few moments, I'd like to enter into that dimension of the heart of a laborer. And beloved, that's absolutely foundational and essential. I've watched this year as I've had the privilege of being involved with numerous Christian leaders, not only in the U.S. but around the world. And one of the things that deeply concerns me today is the numbers of Christians that start out well in the Christian life, but they're ending very poorly. Ending very poorly. And I think there are some reasons for that, and I want to speak to what I believe is the single most important reason for that tonight. It's the heart of a laborer. I'd like to speak to that dimension of it tonight. I'd like to share with you tonight one of the saddest stories that was ever recorded in the Bible, in all of history. And there's a principle in history. Those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat history. But the beauty of it is you and I can learn from history. And tonight I want to crystallize a very sad, sobering, significant story for you. And trust that the Lord would lay on your heart the importance of encouraging and yoking ourselves together in that we stimulate and encourage one another in this area of the heart of a laborer. Then tomorrow afternoon at 2:30, I'd like to shift gears and talk about the vision of a laborer. I want to suggest to you tomorrow afternoon that down through the ages, as I have looked at history and studied Christian leaders, that vision has been a prominent mark for Christian leaders. And apart from a leader's own personal relationship with God, talking about the heart of a laborer, apart from his own personal relationship with God, being committed to a vision may be the single most important mark or characteristic for Christian leaders down through the ages, men and women alike. And it's interesting as you look at that. Their personal relationship with God, in other words, their heart, and their vision, these two things ended up being the driving force behind their life with God. And I'd like to talk tomorrow afternoon about vision. And I'd like to look at two primary dimensions of that with you tomorrow afternoon. One is developing that, how that comes about. Looking at godly men and women down through history, that God has burned a vision in their heart and they captured their destiny. And I would like to suggest to you that that is the role and of the Holy Spirit that He desires to do in the heart of every Christian. Every Christian. And I want us to look at how that comes about in developing that kind of vision. And I believe that men and women today need that with all we can muster. And we need to talk about that. Secondly, I'd like to look at not only developing that vision, but executing the vision. How do you pull something off like that? How does that actually happen? I'd like to look at those two dimensions of it tomorrow afternoon. And then at 4:30, what I'd like to do is to look at the impact of a laborer. You see, change is a very significant thing that's upon us. I spent 2 weeks this summer out in Southern California, spending 2 weeks studying with a number of men just on some of the concepts of change and the principles of change agentry and what are the major shifts and trends going on in the world today. And one of the things I came away with was a very sobering time for me. And the fact is that within the next decade, now don't let this slip by you, within the next decade, there's going to be more change that takes place in the next 10 years than has taken place in the last 3 decades all combined. Do you understand the implications of that? I'm 48 years old. 30 years ago, I was 18. There was not even a TV in my home. Our telephone had party lines on it. 3 rings and 2. 30 years ago, the technology, the political, the economic, the social, the religious, what did it look like 30 years ago? Can you imagine and think back and think of all the change that's taken place in the last 30 years? Now get hold of that. because the next 10 years, there's going to be more change that takes place in the next 10 years than has taken place the sum total of the last 3 decades combined. If you think that your pace of life is demanding now, hang on, because you hadn't seen anything yet. The next 10 years is going to be a humdinger. It's going to be like stepping on an escalator going 90 miles an hour with a whiplash and all that goes with it. The technology, politically, economic, socially, in every dimension. What is that going to mean for us in terms of what is God doing? We need to step back and get off the escalator, and we need to say, God, what are you doing? We need to fast and wait on God. We need to look at the major shifts and trends going on in the world today. Depending on how we are willing to look at that and come to grips with it is going to dictate and determine the relevance of the church of Jesus Christ. And if we don't come to grips with that individually in our own families and as we live, work, and play, it's going to be an awesome thing. However, it could be the greatest opportunity that the Christian faith has and has had in the last several hundred years of history, if we'll understand what God is doing and respond to that. Now, what I want to do on that last message together is to try to bring in focus for you just a little bit of what's going to be happening in terms of the major shifts and trends in the world today. But what I'd like to leave you with are 3 key strategic guiding principles that I believe with all my heart will carry us into that next decade as Christians. It's going to have to be simple, and I would suggest to you that it is. That which is truly profound is simple. That which is really powerful is simple. And I want to leave you with 3 guiding principles to hang your hat on, to carry you into that next decade. And I believe with all my heart, if they're adhered to and if we respond to them, that we'll see an outpouring of the Spirit in ways that we never dreamt possible. But I want to tell you something. They're costly. But if we will respond to just these 3, I believe and would suggest to you things that we've never dreamt would take place. So I'd like to leave you with a rapid change in society that's taking place and 3 principles to guide you into impacting your city in Singapore and the rest of the world and what that might mean. So 3 simple, profound, but powerful principles. We'll talk tonight a little later, the heart of a laborer, tomorrow the vision of a laborer, and lastly, the impact of a laborer. Well, the thrust of our time this evening, the heart of a laborer. If you have your Bibles with you, turn into the Old Testament, into 1 Kings chapter 8. That'll be the passage that we'll spend our time in tonight. And 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 54 through 61. The context to this passage is absolutely essential that you grasp. If you don't grasp the context, you miss all the significance, the heart of this thing. The Great Commission had its beginning rooted all the way back in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And prior to that, chapter 12, the first 11 chapters is basically just a prologue to God's great plan of redemption. And His great plan of redemption in history that is going today and that you and I are part of actually began unfolding historically and at a point in time, but it begins for us as in the Bible in Genesis chapter 12. And from Genesis chapter 12 all the way to 1 Kings chapter 8, all the way from Genesis 12 now, and all that God was doing in redemptive history up to 1 Kings 8, God has been building a great nation during this period of time to serve as a channel for providing redemption to the world. And in 1 Kings chapter 8, we find that a nation, the nation of Israel, is at the apex of its glory. That's what God's been doing from Genesis 12 all the way up to 1 Kings chapter 8. And it's interesting, you know, I've often thought, you know, Terry, how would you go about building a nation? Well, being from America, I want everything yesterday, and tomorrow's too late. And so I thought, what I would do would maybe start with 10,000. And if you're God, you can, instead of creating one, you can create 10,000. You can do anything you want. I thought, well, maybe not 10,000. Why not just start with 500,000? Just create 500,000. If you're going to build a nation, let's get on with it. But, you know, God doesn't think that way. The way God thinks is that the process is as important as what you end up with. And so instead of starting and creating 500,000 people to build a nation, God started with one man and one woman. And then there was 4, and then 8, and 16, and 32, and it began to multiply until we ended up with a nation. And so there's been this process, hundreds of years going on from Genesis chapter 12, starting with Abraham and Sarah, all the way up to 1 Kings 8. God has been in the process of doing what He said He was going to do. He was going to build a nation to work His great plan of redemption through. And so as we find at 1 Kings chapter 8, this nation of Israel is at the apex of its glory, the fulfillment of all that God said He would do. And at this point in time in history, we have a people, we have a land, we have a government, we have leadership, we have a nation that's experiencing unprecedented wealth and affluence. We have a nation under the leadership of the wisest man that ever lived. The temple of God has now been completed at this point in time in history. God has taken up residence in the temple. And in 1 Kings chapter 8, we find King Solomon leading the people in prayer. He's dedicating himself, the people of God, and this temple of God, committing themselves to serve God and the purposes of God for their generation. And in 1 Kings chapter 8, verses 54 through 61, is King Solomon's benediction. So I want you to capture what all has been taking place up to this point in time, and it's finally upon us. God is dwelling in the temple. The people of God are bowing before God, committing themselves to serve the purposes of God in their own generation, to accomplish. And God is taking this channel, this great channel of His, this nation of Israel, this vessel and vehicle, and He's going to work through that to reach all the other nations of the world. And He's going to invite those nations to come in and look at the redemptive reigning rule of God and see it taking place in Israel. He is just now at the apex of that. He's got a theocracy. All that he's been working, supplication to the Lord. He arose from before the altar of the Lord, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread toward heaven. And he stood and he blessed all the assembly of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord, who has given rest to His people Israel, according to all that He promised. Not one word has failed from all of His good promise, which He promised through Moses His servant. May the Lord our God be with us, as He has been with our fathers. May He not leave us or forsake us, that He may incline our hearts to Himself, to walk in all of His ways, and to keep His commandments and His statutes and His ordinances, which He commanded our fathers. And may these words of mine, which I have made supplication before the Lord, be near to the Lord our God day and night, that He might maintain the cause of His servant and the cause of His people Israel, as each day requires, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, There is no one else. Let your heart, therefore, be wholly devoted to the Lord your God, to walk in His statutes and to keep His commandments as at this day. Following this benediction, we see the unfolding of one of the saddest stories ever recorded in history. The bottom is just about to fall out. Everything going for it at this point in time. We finally reached the climax, the apex of everything that God had been working toward in this theocracy. And yet, because of the heart of a man, the bottom falls out. These people had gone through so much to get to this point in time. God had molded their relationship to Himself generation after generation. Their relationship to each other. He had molded a nation that was now ready to experience the outworking of the purposes of God. And yet we find this congregation at this great leader. They are shortly to be scattered. And it was not likely that they would ever be all together again in this whole world. What happened? The rest of 1st and 2nd Kings and the parallel account in Chronicles record history's hall of fame of leaders who struck out for God. They started out well, but they finished very poorly. And it all began with the wisest man that ever lived. I'd like to suggest to you tonight that the key to success or failure lies in 1 Kings 8:61. Let your heart, therefore, be wholly devoted to the Lord our God. The heart, Jeremiah says, in Jeremiah 17:9 and 10, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the conscience, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Now that's a sobering thought. The heart is deceitful. You need to recognize that. And you need to be honest with yourself and with a few others. The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. And here's the sad part is that God loves you so much, He's going to let you reap the fruit of your ways and the fruit of your doings. Come to grips with your heart. When we become Christians, God changes that. And for the first time now, we have the power to live a different life. To live a different life. We desperately need to stimulate one another unto love and good works in these days more than ever before. As we think about the heart, tonight, is your heart wholly devoted to the Lord your God? In Proverbs 4:23, it says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the real issues of life. Romans 10:9 and 10 says you believe with your heart, not with your head. Our philosophy of Christian education today is geared at making us doctrinally sound in the head. God says you don't believe in the head, you believe with the heart. That's what Romans 10:9 and 10 says. We've got to learn what it means as the Spirit of God indwells the heart to have a conscience void of offense toward God and man, a clear conscience so that the Spirit of God can lead us in our hearts, so that truth can get from the head to the heart. Because real conviction, real vision that burns has to burn in the heart and not in the head. As you look at the great saints down through history whom God touched and anointed, it was because they somehow figured out that that information had to get to the heart. When something burns in the heart, you exchange your life for it. One of my concerns today as I travel around the world and get involved with Christians, I find that More than ever before, we know so much and are doing so little. One of my concerns today is that we are so doctrinally sound, and yet we're sterile and crippled. We're not taking that truth and letting it be lived out in life and service as we relate with one another, as we relate to those where we live and where we work and where we play. We're not becoming light and salt in the world today. It all begins and it ends with the heart, in the heart. I have had the sad opportunity to be with a number of Christian leaders that started out well but finished poorly. And with everyone I've had a chance to be with, I've queried and wanted to know what happened. What happened? And with most of them, I find they meant well, but with most of them, they got caught up in the parade and they missed the main event. It's so easy to get caught up in the parade with all the activity and the hoopla and the programs and the pageants and all that's going on and miss the main event. The main event is knowing Him. And as I use the word knowing, the Greek word is epinosis. It's experientially knowing Him. There are two words for knowing. Gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, and epinosis, E-P-I-G-N-O-S-I-S. Two Greek words for knowing. And when you look and follow those two words throughout the New Testament, the epinosis is knowing Him experientially. And that's what I'm talking about. You're not just knowing Him intellectually, gnosis. That has been one of the great dangers and faults all throughout history, is the gnosis of the Christian faith instead of the epinosis of the Christian faith. So what I'm talking about is taking God's Word and living it out in life and in service, where we live, where we work, and where we play. Is your heart tonight wholly devoted to the Lord your God? In Mark 4:19, Jesus said, "Beware of the cares of this age and the deceitfulness of riches and the lust of other things that enter in and choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful in your life." When our hearts are not wholly devoted, we're in trouble. King Solomon's son, King Rehoboam, in 2 Chronicles 12:14, he says, "And he did evil because he did not set his heart to seek the Lord." One of the reasons that King Rehoboam started out well, but he finished poorly, he did not drive that stake down. I don't care about others, but as for me and my household, we're going to serve the Lord. I don't care what others may do in terms of activity, in terms of whatever else. I'm committed myself to serve the Lord in all that that means, in all of its purity, wholly devoted to Him. The Christian faith is one big yes and a lot of little uh-huhs throughout life. It's nailing that stake down that Rehoboam never did, and setting your heart to be wholly devoted to Him and building your life around making that happen. And then all throughout life, it's a lot of little as the Lord reminds you, oh yeah, okay, and responding to it. One big yes, a lot of little all throughout life. Allowing Him to lead you as you go. If you've never driven that stake down, I pray to God that you'll do that this weekend before Monday rolls around. To not do that is to chart a course destined for failure. The winds are going to get you. You've got to drive that stake down and commit yourself to a heart that's wholly devoted to the Lord your God. Now Solomon had the key, but he never unlocked the door. And in 2 chapters later, in 1 Kings 11:4, here's what it says. Solomon's heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God. And in verse 9 it says, "Now the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel. God was angry with Solomon. Solomon had the key, everything going for him. This great theocracy was just at the verge of God going to work through that to reach the other nations of the world. And because of the heart of one man, it was shelved, never to come about again. God chose a different plan and a different approach. Now, beloved, his plan and his approach today is you. It's your heart today. The Spirit of God has come to live in your heart today. You have all the wisdom of Solomon and much, much more today, because you have the completed canon, the completed revelation. It is no longer a mystery in light of history. We know what God began, what He is doing, and what He is going to do. And you are a part of that today. And the Spirit of God lives in your heart today. Now, we can learn from history. Or, if we don't, we're doomed to repeat it. But let me suggest to you that you are at a similar juncture today. We too have a calling and a cause, an enormous commission. And we have the key to unlock the door in verse 61. Let your heart be holy, not partially. That's unmixed, unfeigned. It's the idea of Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they're going to see God. That pure in heart has the idea of unmixed thoughts. That's what it means. It means that you're void of the tyranny of a divided self. Oh, I want to be in the world, and I want this, and yet I want to be godly, and I'm torn, I'm like a chameleon. You put them on red and they turn red, and you put them on blue and they turn blue, and you put them on plaid and they have a nervous breakdown. It's the idea of, I can't decide, when I'm with this group I'm like them, and when I'm with this group I'm like them, and I don't know what to do. It's so confusing. Well, there's got to come a day that you drive a stake down, or you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. It's an undivided heart that we're talking about. It's wholly devoted. What are you devoted to? To Christ, and you've gone too far. It's Christ and Christ alone. Well, let your heart, therefore, be wholly devoted to the Lord your God. There are some parallels here, some remarkable parallels for us and for our nation. There are two sides here. If you just draw a line down and take what Solomon did and then put yourself up here. Put the nation of Israel under Solomon, and put Singapore under your name. There are two parallels here that are interesting. On the one side, Israel had a rich spiritual heritage. And I was chatting with a couple of you the last couple of days about your heritage here in Singapore. Beloved, in Asia, I want to tell you, you have got a rich spiritual Christian heritage. It's been built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets of years gone by, and all the saints down through the ages. But I want to tell you something. The ball is in your court now. You have the ball at this time in history. Your destiny, you're either going to capture it or you're not. History's going to write about our generation. But it's your heart today, and it's my heart, not Solomon's. But you have a rich Christian spiritual heritage, and so did Israel. Israel had experienced at this point in time unprecedented wealth and affluence. There was no nation in the world that had experienced it anymore. as I have watched Singapore over the last 10 years, yes, you've been in a recession, you're coming out, you're not out of it yet, but as you look at Singapore in comparison with the other cities in this part of the world, the other nations in this part of the world, I want to tell you, Singapore has experienced unprecedented wealth and affluence. It's never been this good. Never. Never in the history of Singapore. And likewise, never in the history of Israel. Solomon's calling and his cause was absolutely clear. And beloved, your calling and your cause has never been clearer. Now, because of the rapid things going on in society and the demands that are placed on you, it's very easy to get your vision fuzzy. Very easy to lose 20/20 vision. What I want to talk about tomorrow is getting that in focus. If we miss that, you're going to miss the destiny that God has for you and for your generation. Solomon's calling and his cause was absolutely clear, and yours is too. There's a commission that God's called us to. We've got to bring that in focus, and what is that going to mean for us in this next decade? And if we're not careful, we can get on a bandwagon that's going 90 miles an hour heading toward a cul-de-sac. There's no outlet at the other end. It's one way. Can't get out. I have some great fears and some great concerns. But I've also got some great news for you tomorrow. Great news. You can be part of the solution. Solomon's calling and his cause was clear. Our calling and our cause is very clear. Solomon and the nation of Israel, they were on the threshold of impact. It was at this point in time in 1 Kings 8 that the theocracy was there, God working through the redemptive rule, leading through man, reaching out through that nation, leading it, that he was going to reach the other nations of the world. Well, we stand at this point in time in history on the threshold again of impact. I'd like to bring that in focus for you more tomorrow. Likewise, Solomon held the key, but he never used it. And beloved, you hold the key in your heart, and the jury's still out on whether you'll use it or not. I want to tell you something. Victor used and quoted a verse in 2 Chronicles 16:9 a while ago. Do you know the context of 2 Chronicles 16:9? It's the same context of 1 Kings chapter 8. It's just approaching the same events in history from another standpoint. At this same time in history, God is saying, and He's saying today, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole world in Singapore to make Himself strong in the hearts of them who are perfect toward Him. God longs, He longs to take average people, average people, not 10 talented people, just average people, and make Himself strong. See, God always works in such a way that He gets the credit for it. He's just looking for a man and for a woman who will get their heart in the right gear and in the right perspective and come alongside that He can work through. He's longing to do that. And all throughout history, we see God doing something very special at points in time in history, at various pockets all over the world, bringing together bands of men and women whose hearts have been touched by God, and they were willing to believe God for their day. Oh, that would happen today. That would happen today. Well, there's much to learn from history. It's often been said that those that don't learn from it are doomed to repeat it. Can you learn from history? Well, that's what 1 Corinthians 10, 11, and 12 is saying. It's referring back to 1 Kings at this point in time in history, and it says in 1 Chronicles 10, 11 and 12, it says, "Now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written for our instruction, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed, lest he too fall." Take heed. You can learn from history. You can. It behooves us to learn the message that history affords us, and this one is a humdinger. It's a good one. But we can stand, and all throughout history, there have been men and women who did stand for God and the purposes of God during their generation. And the eyes of the Lord do run to and fro tonight, wanting to do that, wanting to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Let your heart, therefore, be wholly devoted to the Lord your God. Remember this. If the Great Commission ever precedes the Great Commandment in your life, then you have charted a course that's destined to fail. I speak from experience. The Lord was gracious to point that out. I am a very task-oriented person. I had a watershed time in my own life a few years ago. And I was primarily so committed to the Great Commission, I got caught up in the parade, roaring around. And see, you can even do the right thing for the wrong reason. But one day, if you do, you stop doing the right thing. The Great Commandment has got to precede the Great Commission in your life. One of the reasons that the body of Christ today is in such a sterile mode is that they didn't figure that out. When the Pharisees and the Sadducees came together and asked Jesus, "Lord, you've taught us so much," in Mark 12, 30 and 31. They say, "Well, Lord, what is the most important